Welcome back to part 2 of our series where we are building this wonderful user form, which will give us the ability to query an SQL database that we specify and actually write the query and then see the results immediately in that user form. So in the previous video, we just kind of set everything up. So we created the modules that needed to be created and excuse me. And then we also wrote the code for the first form, which was right down here. So what we're going to do in this one is we're probably going to, well, at this point, we're really basically going to just build the form itself. I'm going to try to do my best to recreate it the way you're seeing it now. I can't guarantee it's going to look exactly the same, but I'm going to try to get it pretty close. In fact, that reminds me, top and left. No, that's not it. Oh, no. I have to remember how wide it is. 504, 557. That's really unexact, but okay. Okay, so let's go through the process of making this out. All right, so 504. That's close enough. And then we'll go here, 550. Yeah, I think that's fine. Okay, so this is kind of the overall size of it. And we can change the caption. I don't want it to say user form 1. I want it to say SQL form. So now it's changed. My font is going to be, I have Roboto installed, so you get to luckily see that one. I just saw it. There it is. Okay, so we'll do Roboto. I want regular. I think 10's enough. We'll see how big that is. I'm going to change the background color. So I actually just want it all white for the most part. And then from there, where's my notes? There's my notes. Okay, so now there's a couple different things we need. The first one, probably the most important one, is our list view. So I'm going to put that right here, and I'll put it down a little bit. And then I need a button. So I need a button to execute. Where's my button? I thought my button was right here. Command button, there it is. Okay, we'll put this. That's kind of centered, right? Okay, perfect. So there's our list view. I need a frame. Where's my frame? Frame, okay. And then I want my frame to be approximately the same size as that. Okay. I'm going to need some labels. Oh, yeah, that's fine. And then I'll just copy it a couple times. Again, it might not look exactly like it, but it's going to be pretty close. That's always the trouble when I try to, recreate the user forms. It's like you get so close, yet you get so far. Sometimes it feels like, it never looks exactly like what you wanted it to. And of course, they're not evenly spaced, and that's going to drive me crazy. Okay. This is what happens when you work with me, is I'll spend an abnormal amount of time literally formatting. Okay. No, we want it just a little bit. Is that really what's supposed to be? Okay, well, all right. I don't know. I just follow orders. Okay. I'll put this down just a tiny bit. It's funny because I was somewhere the other day and I was coding, and then they looked at some of my stuff and they're like, God, you spent an awful amount of time on that. And I said, I know, but it looks nice, right? And they're like, yeah, but Jesus. Oh, it's okay. Okay, so there's that. So this is where we're gonna write our query. I'll make another label, and this is pretty close to what it looks like in the other one. So this is pretty much how it's gonna look, right? So now we're gonna go through and we're just gonna change some things up. So here, we wanna give them meaningful names, because if we have to reference them in VBA, the last thing you're gonna wanna look at is label 5 and try to remember what that means. So I try to give it something meaningful. So like, for example, if this is query label, then it's probably gonna have query in it. So normally what I do is I'll just I'll put the name of the label itself, so whatever the caption is, and I'll do that. Now, I do want it to be transparent, so I want to be able to see through everything, because I'm just like that. Again, that's just me being me. This will be password label, and then obviously since it's password, we want that, and then I want a colon. This will be the username label, and then this will obviously be username, and I want this again to be transparent. This will be database label, and then this one I make a little bit different. I say database name. Okay. This one will be server label. And then again, we're going to make it transparent. And then this one, I want it to be server name. Okay. So that's that. I'm going to change this, and I'm going to say query frame. And I'll just say query. Oh no, I think I gave it something different. Query info, that's what I thought I was gonna say. Query info. We'll just do info to be consistent. Okay, so we've done labels. We need to make this the query, just again to be consistent, query text box. Okay, so we'll call this query text box, and that's fine. This will be the password text box. This will be the username text box, database text box, server text box. So that's good. I really hope I didn't. Okay. Info password database. Okay. I think there's only one I have to change, and that's that one because it's a capital. Okay, so we did that. Our list view. So this one will say query list view. I think that's, no, query results. Okay, and then what's the label? Okay. Query results. Okay, so that's good. I want my appearance to be flat. Now, technically, I changed that in the code, so you don't really have to change it here, but that's just also to kind of let you know, like, a lot of the things I was setting in VBA, you can also control them from here. Sometimes it just makes sense to do it from VBA. Sometimes it just makes sense to do it from the toolbox or the property window here. Again, it's kind of up to you. There's not really a wrong or a right way per se. Okay, so we did this. Now we need our execute query button. And so we'll say execute query. Query command button. Again, just to be consistent, I'm going to check execute button. It's always something. I can sometimes never remember what I name it, but this way at least I'm hopefully not too crazy. Okay, so at this point, we've kind of built our query. I think this is good. Ideally, we should be able to display it, and we can see this is what it looks like. So we're getting there. We're definitely getting somewhere closer to our kind of like end goal, which is nice. It looks a lot better than what it was. It looks like it's following kind of the design that we were following. So at this point, it's looking good. We're getting closer to what our end goal is. So what we're gonna do next is I did want to take just a tiny bit of time to talk a little bit about documentation for some of this, particular some of the controls that you might want to incorporate into your user forms. Unfortunately, for the particular list view control that I had, there didn't seem to be a VBA example of it, but I could find a C# one. And so that's actually not too surprising, to be honest. Like C#, you can build a lot of Windows form applications, and there's a ton of different components that you can incorporate into them. So normally, if it's like a window form application or has anything to do with a form, you can almost always find it on the .NET documentation somewhere. It might not line up exactly to what you can do in VBA, but you can usually kind of experiment a little bit and you'll kind of figure out like, okay, like this one doesn't work, this one does work, and stuff like that. Now, what you can see here is you can see kind of just different examples about, how to play around with them, how to add them, all sorts of different things. And you can even see how like you can add and remove items. You can do things like add search capabilities to your particular list view object. So they try to guide you in the right direction as to like, hey, if you want to add some functionality to it, like how do you go about doing it? And how do you go about, doing it in a systematic approach? So I think this is great. Obviously, when I upload the code to GitHub, I'll make sure to add a link because it's already in the link here. But at least it gives you something. You're not going into it completely blind, but just keep in mind you might run into challenges down the road if you're trying to find like VBA specific documentation for some of your controls, because they just simply might not exist. You might be able to find it in another language, but normally the object is like written in such a way where the methods and properties are usually pretty intuitive. You just gotta play around with it and kind of say like, okay, if I change that, what happens? If I don't change that, what happens? And then normally you can kind of like narrow into like, okay, so like this does that, this does this, and and everything like that. Okay, so we finally built our grid. We now need to add the functionality component, right? So like right now it's not doing anything. We can't execute a query. We can't connect to anything. It's pretty much just a shell that looks pretty. And some would even argue it doesn't even look pretty, but it's a shell. We need to add some functionality to it so that way when the user clicks something or types something, something is done with that information behind the scenes and it's used in the appropriate way. So there's different ways to access the code portion of your user form. You can right click and say view code. You can also click on the object that you want to specifically have code execute for. In my example, or at least in my user form, the only time code should be executing is when this button is clicked. So I don't want code executing like when they're typing. I don't want code executing when they're entering stuff. Nothing really like that. All I want is when they click this button, the query that they write here executes and it's displayed down here. And then obviously this is used for some connection purposes. So if you don't go over here and right click to view code, you can also just double click into the object you want to add code to. So when I do that, it will automatically take me to the code. For right now, we'll just turn off option explicit just to kind of make things a little bit easier. And then from here, we can start the process of actually writing the code to incorporate the functionality. So the first group of object variables that we're going to be creating are going to be related to the actual form control. So some of them at least. So here, define variables related to form controls. We'll do dim query text box as msforms.textbox. We'll do server text box, as you guessed it, msforms.textbox, dim database text box as msform. Oh, interesting. Huh. Well, that's interesting. Never seen that one. Well, I think that's the one we just enabled, right? Looks like it. Okay, so that's our third text box. That's related to our database name. We're going to also have one for our query results, right? So we'll just do query results, and that will be our list view. So this is where we're going to be storing our data. So that's related to our form controls. The next portion is going to be related to our connection object. So to connect to our database, we're going to be using another reference library. If we go up to Tools, down to References, we now get a list of all the reference libraries that we have currently enabled. So we have Forms, our common controls, and our Office Object, OLE Automation, Excel 16, and Visual Basic. I want the Microsoft Access Data Objects library enabled. So when we do this one, this is just a great library for connecting to different data sources and then manipulating the results of those queries that we execute related to those data sources. So a lot of it's like these in-memory databases that make working with data really, really easy and super quick. So very advantageous to use the ADODB library. So the ActiveX Data Object library. It's always a tongue twister for me. I don't know why. Okay, so define variables related to connection object. The first one is going to be our connection object itself. So this is going to be the ADODB, and it's going to be a connection object. The next one is going to be a record set object. So this basically contains the results of a query. And then this one will be our ADODB, and then it will be our record set object. So a collection of records. Then we have some other stuff. We're going to do connection command. This is going to be an ADODB. And then it's going to be a command. Oh, God. It's going to be one of those ones. ADODB. And then this is going to be command object. Next, we're going to have some column names. And so the way the Active Data X object library considers them is they're not columns, they're actually called fields. Now, for whatever reason, it won't necessarily, it kind of freaks out and says like, oh, there's nothing there. There is something there, just for whatever reason, IntelliSense kind of freaks out and doesn't know what to do with it. But you can just write it as is. And then the next one is going to be our SQL query, and that's going to be a string object. Or sorry, no, that's down below. I was looking at the wrong notes. Okay, so the next one will be count, and this will be an integer. This is going to be for some looping that we do. Okay, and then we need to define some variables related to our connection string. And I think, yeah, it's just our connection string. So the first one is going to be called data source. This will be a string. And then the next one will be called database name. This will also be a string. And then next one will be our server name. And then this will also be our string. Excuse me. And then we also have our query, which is going to be the query that's in our query text box, right? So this is just kind of setting things up, kind of like I was saying before. So again, just setting things up, making sure our variables are declared and stuff like that. And let me check time. Yeah, we'll cut it. Okay, so we'll kind of cut it off here. Again, just to recap, we built our user form. We went over some documentation related to some of the controls, and we also got our variables declared because now we're starting to add that functionality component to our user form. So we have to kind of go about it in a methodical, systematic way, right? In our next one, we're going to be finishing up writing the code, and really that's it. So this is actually a little bit quicker than the last one. But we're just kind of doing it all in one module. So it's a lot of code, but I think, related to my other videos, you've kind of seen most of this before if you've watched some of my other videos. So it shouldn't be crazy new. We're just kind of taking tricks that we've learned from other videos and kind of just incorporating it all into like a single video. So that's what's going to be coming up next. Again, at this point, if you have any questions, feel free to put them down in the comments below. Otherwise, we will see you in video number 3.